to the peak of the tree. So there I am, alongside my magical fairy friend, parading around the school wall, black and proud.
Our story has so many different threads, and it's been quite interesting to actually start to pursue those different cultural lines that make us who we are. Mum came over to Australia when she was 7 from Holland. Our grandfather was quite amazing in a lot of respects. For instance, when they first came out to Australia, he actually came a couple of years ahead of our grandmother and the daughters, Mum and his 2 sisters. And basically it was to kind of get himself settled before he then sent the others to follow. Our father, who was born in Queensland but is of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, basically left Queensland at a young age when he met our mother. I think he was sitting playing guitar in a bar type of cafe thing here, and this guy came up to him and said, "Oh, have you ever thought about acting? I work for the ABC," and hence he got kind of on this whole path of acting. He's since gone on. He was then kind of washed into the tide of all the Black Power movement that was happening around the 60s and 70s, moved to Sydney, established the early National Black Theatre Company. So he's very well known certainly through the Indigenous community and more broadly in the arts. Basically, Mum was at arts college. She'd done 1 year, and when she tells the story, she talks about it was basically her opportunity to get out of home. And about 4 of them had decided they were going to go on a holiday, drove all the way up to Cairns. Anyway, somewhere around there. Dad tells the story. He remembers seeing her walking past their kind of little hut on the beach where they were staying. Dad was married at the time with 2 sons, 2 little boys, and I think the story he tells years later is, it wasn't such happy times. They were always fighting and arguing. Anyway, for whatever reason, it was meant to be that him and Mum decided to elope. Back in early 60s, Queensland, it was extremely not okay for a black and white, a mixed couple. So basically they got seriously harassed by the police at every stop along the way. Stories like, they'd be they'd turn up into town and straight away the police would be there to greet them, take them to the police station, empty out the suitcase all over the ground. And I very much think that going back to Mum and Dad both being outsiders in their own experience, I'm sure that is exactly what they saw in each other. I think they very much, on some innate level, really understood what it was like to be an outsider. Yeah, very much. I know Mum, to this day, still says, "I will never feel like this is my home." Oh, that's a funny story. Mum, his first introduction to my father, this black man, was Mum coming up to him and she goes, "Oh, I'd like you to meet my boyfriend, and we're 5 months pregnant." And apparently there was deathly silence, and they all just stood there going, waiting for the response. And then after a while, he says, "Well, I guess it's too late for an abortion then." He actually came to really like Dad because Dad's such a charmer. Dad was always singing, one of those, people don't do that much in this country, but people just, the sort of people that would just get on the piano or get on the guitar and just start singing, was very much our father. And he had that instilled in us. So we were, from a very early age, I can't even think how long, I was the one on the guitar and then we'd sing harmonies.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's been singing for as long as we can remember.
Some of the songs in the show, in Sisters of Gellam, one of them is When the Funeral is On, which is actually a song that was sung. We found out later, that's another story. We found out that it actually was sung at the funeral, and we were up visiting our aunties to try and get some language. And they were teaching us a song, and then we watched the footage of our father's funeral. And there was a Dutch song.
That's right, we had to have language songs from both sides, which we didn't know, we had to learn. But I had heard Mum singing it, but certainly hadn't learnt it. There was a song that Mum and Dad always sang together. So at one point we kind of jump up and sing this
Act like Mum and Dad.
ridiculous song.
Yes.
But that you know, two people sing off each other, and one of those kind of old style humour songs.
Just one more dance.
Essentially, it's three storylines, and those three storylines try and encapsulate the three kind of primary themes, which is basically the journey of these two sisters going from Melbourne all the way up to the Torres Strait. So they're on a journey back to country, so kind of tracing their roots and knowing where they come from. So that's obviously the one side of the family. The second storyline is a traditional Torres Strait Islander story of this boy called Gelam, and his story is a story of which basically is like a creation story for the Torres Strait Islands, forms the islands of the Torres Strait Islands. The third storyline is a story that we call the Little Dutch Girl, and that's obviously embodies Mum's story, and her story is this very simplistic story of this little Dutch girl who travels many, many miles over the oceans and finally comes to this country, and once she arrives she looks like, oh my God, because it's dry, it's hot, it's disgusting and ugly.
Flies.
It's flies. It's like, oh my God, who could live here? And this black man comes to her and says, look, don't be too hasty in wanting to go home, and gives her a seed to plant a tree, and the tree is the wongai tree. And the story with the wongai is that when you eat the fruit of the wongai, you will always have a longing to be at that place. So anyway, she plants the tree, she grows the tree, and she's counting, waiting for this tree to grow so she can get home. But of course she tastes the fruit and finds herself, after all these years, realising that she actually sees the country quite differently and has become quite accustomed to its beauty and sees its beauty for what it is. So anyway, so these three storylines basically sum us up.
Wakker ahoy, ahoy, wakker al op de brug. We komen van verre landen terug. Van storm af aan weer zijn we niet bang.